So here we are being joined today by another great friend of mine, Gerry King. It's like I have all these great friends, all these women friends. I'm so really fortunate to have so many great friends. Today we're doing Her Stories, 100 Women's Voices, and I am really, really happy to have the opportunity to speak with one of my great friends, Gerry King, who is joining us today and going to look at her life and hearing it from her voice in terms of what her life has been like and where she is today, and how she saw herself as a young woman, because you are farther down the line in terms of your career. You're talking about retiring in the next year. And so clearly you have moved past all those ages of 20 and 30 and so forth. So I think there's a great wealth of knowledge that you could share with us, and especially for young women in particular. So let me get started, Gerry, and thank you again for being here. Tell me, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Western New York. It was a town called Dunkirk, New York. It was right in the middle between Buffalo, New York and Erie, Pennsylvania, right on the lake, Lake Erie. And it was a small town. And when I grew up, it was like neighborhoods that were Polish, Irish, and Italian. And I grew up in the Italian neighborhood. My parents and aunt and uncle owned a grocery store. We all lived together. It was my mom and dad and my brother and me on one side of the house. And the other side was my grandmother, my aunt, my father's aunt, sister and brother, and the grocery store all the way in front of the house. And
Wow.
it was, I had a happy childhood. I never had anything to want for because we had the grocery store. But it was, I think probably that's why I am so concerned about racism, because when I grew up, if I had wanted to walk from my house to my aunt's house, which was like 4 blocks away, it was going out of our neighborhood through another ethnic neighborhood, who then, when by the time I got to my aunt's house, I heard all kinds of names calling me. So it was a little difficult, but then my generation changed it. We all were friends. We
Mhm.
weren't we weren't an Italian friend or an Italian person or a Polish person. We were just friends. We grew up that way. So we
Right.
kind of changed everything,
Mhm.
and
In your
for the
community.
good, for the
Right.
good, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And tell
And
me, in
go
terms
ahead.
of values and how you were raised, there were, I'm sure, a lot of great family values about the importance of family. But how were you raised in terms of your values as far as women and the role that women were supposed to play in society at that time in your generation?
Right. Well, my mother was a homebody. She also worked in the store, our grocery store. Um, but the expectations were that you went to high school and then you met somebody and you fell in love and you got married and then you moved out of the house. I had said earlier, my aunt, I still can remember her saying, so and so's daughter moved out of the house. She's not even married. And I go, well, what's wrong with that? You're supposed to live with your family until you get married. And my aunt did, my aunt and my uncle, and we lived with my grandmother too. So it was different. They worked, but my aunt worked all her life, but it was in a like a, not the steel mill, but a shop like that.
Mhm.
But she couldn't see that any young person should have a career, like a doctor or uh, anything.
Yeah.
Secretary, yes, because that's what you were supposed to be.
Right, right,
Uh,
right.
that
More
was about
female driven types of jobs or careers versus a
right.
doctor,
Yes, that's what
an
you were,
architect.
teacher, right. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's what you were pushed towards. Um, as far as socially, my parents were Democrats, and they weren't prejudiced. And I grew up with the feeling that you take care of others. My mother was like an angel. She really was. She took care of everybody. Everybody that in the neighborhood who was sick would come and see her, and she would, talk to them, tell them what to do, because a lot of them were older Italian women.
Mhm.
My parents were born in the States, but their parents were from Italy.
Right.
So
So your parents were born in this country, so they were first generation American.
yes, exactly.
Now,
Yeah.
did your grandmother speak Italian?
Yes, she only spoke Italian. She knew very few English words. She would sit out on the stoop next to the grocery store, and people would go by and she'd go, "Nice a day today, nice a day." It's about all she knew. And she really was upset with me because I didn't understand Italian. I could kick myself now, but I was young and
Right.
silly. Yeah.
Right. And it's true. Oftentimes, we want to assimilate, and we think that if we are too cultural, back to
Yes.
our roots, that that there's some shame in that, and there really isn't. I mean, this
No, right.
of so many different people from so many different countries. So now you became a young woman in Dunkirk, New York, which I am familiar with the area because I went to Alfred University, which is
Oh,
up there as well. So I'm
uh-huh.
very familiar with upstate New York in that sense. And it's very different from obviously downstate New York
Yes.
and growing up. So my question is, so when you went to high school, did you go to college? What happened after that?
I did not go to college. I went to high school and then went to Rochester Business Institute for
Okay.
secretarial work. And then at the time I was dating my husband. I dated him starting in my junior year of high school. And
Did
and
you go
foolish,
from the same town?
same town. Yep. He
Okay.
grew up at the same time. He went to the Catholic school. I went to the public school. He was actually in the seminary for 2 years before he came out. And he when he was a sophomore in high school when he came out. So we met and we started going together. And so then I didn't want to stay in Rochester. So I came home and I got a job as just in the record room of the local hospital in Brooks Memorial Hospital. And from there, the administrator of the hospital asked me to be his secretary. So I went from there to being a secretary until I got married, and I was married at 21.
Wow. Now, did you
Yeah.
continue to work after you were married? And then how soon after that did you have kids?
I did work after I got married. I was working for a law firm in Washington, D.C. My husband and my brother had moved to Washington, D.C. And so then after we married, I got a job at a law firm right downtown, right across the street from the White House, actually.
Wow.
And yeah.
I didn't know that about you. That's great.
Yeah, it was quite a time, quite a time. And then I think I was 22 when I had my first daughter, Melissa. So then I quit. And I didn't go back to work until my husband was transferred to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we moved. And then I got a job there working. I had many jobs. I worked for a t-shirt printing company. I started out as the secretary, and then he wanted to devote more time to something else, and he made me manager of the shop. So I said, okay. Then he sold it, and I didn't have a job for a little bit. I learned how to repair um, Naugahyde furniture for like diners and stuff like that. I was taught that. And I mean, it was interesting. I met a lot of different people. And then after that, I got a permanent job at a place called Share, which was an HMO. And it turned out that they sold their insurance company to United.
Oh wow.
So
And was this all still in Minnesota, or how did you end up
Minnesota.
in New Jersey?
I moved to New Jersey. We lived in Minnesota for 9 years.
Mhm.
And then Phil, my husband Phil, got a job with Unisys. And so we moved to New Jersey. and I've been here ever since.
Yes, that's where I met you in New Jersey, and
Right, you were our rep for Justin's. Yes,
way
the
back
best rep.
then.
You were the best one we ever had, that's for sure.
Thanks, Gerry. And then how did you end up working in a college, in a university setting?
Well, I had to look for a job. Well, first of all, I was in my kids were in college. They were at Uppsala College. And my husband he always traveled for his job. So I hardly saw him. And here I am in a strange area by myself, don't know how to get around. And I got a job as a teller in a bank, which I hated. And then I got a job at, there's a ski resort here in Vernon, and I got a job with them. And then I got a job with Uppsala College, the college that my kids went to. There was a branch here in Sussex County. So I got a job there as I shared the registrar's job with a young woman who was about to have a baby, and it was becoming too much for her. So she and I shared the job. She worked during the day, I worked at night. And until it closed in 1995. It was sad. And I worked then for the Hilton Hotel in the back of the house. And then I heard there was an opening at Sussex County Community College for secretary to the registrar. And that's when I started working. I worked there for 25 years, starting in January 16th.
That is a very varied career.
Yes.
I mean, I worked in a factory when I was in high school, but you have done like a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, obviously, a lot of this has been clerical and secretarial type stuff, those types of duties, but
Right.
you also did some actual blue collar type of work, right?
I did.
Now, let me ask you something, because you obviously had grown up in a community that was very sheltered and very conservative in some ways, right? What gave you the gumption to move to Washington, D.C., to move to Minnesota, to start a whole new life everywhere that you went?
Well, it's actually because my husband and I, we just got married, and his job was in DC. So that's how I
But you
ended
weren't
up.
scared?
And there was a distant cousin in DC who was a lawyer. He and his wife used to come and visit us, and she was the one who said, come on to my brother and my future husband, come to Washington, there's plenty of jobs. So they both moved and they stayed there, and we lived in on actually, when we were first married, we lived on Minnesota Avenue. That was,
Oh,
and we
wow. That's so funny.
moving to Minnesota, right? Exactly.
And then you end up in Minnesota. That's really funny.
Yeah, and my husband was in computers, that kind of technical stuff, both my husband and my brother. And he ended up actually working for NASA. We moved
Wow.
to Silver Spring, not Silver Spring, we moved to Greenbelt, Maryland, and about a half hour away was NASA. And he was there at the beginning when we were testing the rockets, and then even when the astronauts went up, he could listen to what they were saying. It was supposed to be the hub until President Johnson wanted it in Texas. And so that's where it ended up. But they still did some work. And then, I had to look for a job. So I
Yeah, when did
applied.
you decide to go back to work? I mean, because your kids were how old? You have what, 2 kids?
I have 2 kids, right? I decided, well, I needed the extra money. So you do it by necessity mostly. And it's good to get out of the house too. Because I mean, when you have just kids and there's nobody, your husband is traveling and everything, by the time he comes home, it's like you're talking baby talk.
Right. You need adult interaction.
Right, exactly. So, so I decided that I wanted to look for a job, and I got a job at a law firm right across the street from the White House. So, and I stayed there until I got pregnant, which wasn't very long. and um, and then I stayed home. I stayed home with the kids. I mean, I had a full life with them to begin with. I played volleyball, tennis, bowling. I did all the things that a lot of mothers did, and we had. It was fun, but then when we moved to Minnesota, I needed something to get out of the house, extra money. I mean, it wasn't a lot, but I needed that extra part of my life. And then that's how I ended up. I don't even know. I think I saw an ad in the paper for the first job working for a t-shirt printing company. I was there for quite a while. So about 5 years, I think.
I think that that's really interesting. I mean, obviously, I think it takes great courage to put yourself out there. Each of those times you went for jobs, and you were still of a generation of women where there weren't as many women working out there. It wasn't the norm. It wasn't the norm for women to be working. Most women
Right,
of your generation did stay home to raise their children. So the fact that
right.
you're putting yourself out there like that takes great courage. I'm sure there were people who were probably opposed to you working, who said to you, what are you doing? Your kids, this, that. How did you overcome that?
I don't know. I never really thought that, but I mean, you always heard that when I was first married and you had kids. uh, you know, you know what happens when parents work, they become latchkey kids and then they get into trouble. I mean, you heard all of the stories, but I never believed them. And my mom actually was fine with that too. Never heard a word from her about me working and not staying home with the kids. My kids were old enough, they were in school. I waited till they were in school,
Mhm.
grade school. And
And clearly your husband was also supportive of that, right?
yes, that's one thing about Phil, is that he was always pushing me. And I had always, I could draw, and I always wanted to paint and draw. So when my mom got sick and my mom and dad moved in with us in Maryland, we lived in Maryland, she had her leg amputated from cancer. So she moved in with us and I took care of her. Phil was always, away. Um, I needed something for the stress. And my next door neighbor had a friend who was an artist and had a loft, and he taught for a local community college. So she said, why don't you do that? And it was probably the best thing I ever did. It was, I joined the local community college, and we had lessons in his loft. And it was so much fun. I was probably the oldest person there, but this young boy who sat next to me, I don't think he was more than 18 or 19. He was amazing, an amazing artist. So, and that's how I began, painting and drawing.
Well, and now that you're going to retire, you'll have all this time. You'll be like former President Bush. Baby
Yeah.
Bush is now a famous painter. We're going to see Gerry King's famous paintings. I just want to know that when that happens, I need to be invited to the first art art show of your.
But it's fun. It gets you away, and you're in another world in your mind. So it really takes a lot of the stress out.
I think
So
that's fantastic. I mean, I think it's important for women to do things for themselves, right?
mm,
For you, because we're always giving of ourselves, as a wife, as a mother, as a daughter, as a worker, you're being pulled in 6 different directions, and we rarely take care of ourselves, of our mental, emotional well-being, our physical well-being. So for you to find an outlet for your creativity, for your talents, I think is fantastic that you did that you didn't feel like, oh, I can't do that, an hour of my time, everybody else needs me, but you actually did that, and here you are, you have this talent, this skill that will carry you into way past in that retirement. Trust me. So I think that's fantastic. So before we go, because believe it or not, we're almost done. So
Wow.
yeah, my last question is, you know, now that you are where you are, and you are looking at retirement at this point, you're raising grandchildren, you have a whole full life. I know your husband passed away. Has it been 2 years? Or is it?
It's been 5 years.
Wow. Oh my God. I'm so sorry. It's been 5 years.
5 years, yeah.
But looking now back, right? What advice would you give to young women? I mean, this is a different time. It's a whole different generation, but there's still all these expectations about women and what we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to behave and the roles that we're supposed to play. And sometimes, you know, they put us down and they try to keep us in our place. So what advice would you give to other young women?
Never let anybody tell you you can't do something. Never. Also, have a career. Have something you can fall back on. Not every marriage is made in heaven, and you have to work at it. It's not like you get married and it's, happily ever after. You have to work at it. And if you don't have something to back you up, then you're really, I've seen it so many times in women relatives and friends whose marriages that just sometimes they married the wrong person and then they felt stuck. They couldn't go anywhere. They didn't have an education. They didn't have a skill that they could fall back on or a career. I always told my daughters to always have something to fall back on. Go to college. Both my kids went to college. So if their marriage didn't work out, and it's something that makes you feel good about yourself too. So that I think is my advice. And don't let anybody say you can't do that,
Right.
because you can't.
Well, I mean, and here you are, proof of it, right? Because
Yeah.
your generation of women were definitely not expected to work. We're not expected to have their own voice, their own income, their own,
Yeah.
make their own decisions, right?
Yeah.
You were pretty much, told this is how your life is going to be. But it took women like you to then bring the next generation of women to move forward. And we kind of move that forward in some cases. And in some cases, we've taken step back, unfortunately. But I think it's important for women to understand that we have to exercise our agency and, our independence. And, as mothers in particular, we understand that it's a life of sacrifice, right? It really is a life of sacrifice, but it's a choice. It's a choice. I made a choice to be a mother. Yes. You made a choice to be a mother. You're not obligated to that choice.
No.
It's a personal choice.
Exactly. A lot of people don't understand that at all. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And family is everything. At the end of the day, you do this because of family.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. You do everything. And family is everything. I mean, during this time in the pandemic, I'm telling you, if I did not have my family with me, I don't know what I would have done. Really. I would have been alone.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, me too.
lucky.
Right. I feel the same way. I mean, the fact that I had, 3 children means that, I'm a single parent, but I'm never alone because my kids are still with me. And,
right.
And you have that companionship, you have the relationship, and that really is important. I think in the absence of having that, that's why you have a pet, because that's the other way that you can have those human experiences and that feeling. You need that connection that you need.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
So Gerry, I really do want to thank you so much for joining me today. It's so funny because we've known each other. I think how many years did we figure that out? 15 years, 10 years, something?
No, it's got to be even more because probably about 15 years. Yeah.
Actually,
because
hold on. When I met you, I think I had my 3rd child. She just turned 18.
Okay, then yes, you did. Yeah.
Right.
I remember you bringing the kids to the office, how tiny they were.
Yeah, they were little when I brought them.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so years and time flies. But I also want to highlight, and this is the important part that I want to highlight for all women, is that we really do need each other as women, right? Because over the years, you and I have had this friendship. We don't live necessarily close to each other. We try to get together every once in a while. We haven't lately because of the pandemic.
Yeah, right.
Friendship transcends time and space, right? Because even though we don't see each other very often, when we do see each other, we kind of fall back into that, oh my God, blah, 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 like
Yeah, right.
chatting away. But it's the support that we give each other. And hey, if you need a friend, you need something, you can call me, and vice versa. And it's important to have a nurturing environment for women to understand that let's not be competitive against each other. Let's try to help each other out and pull each other forward. Because
Exactly.
are facing similar challenges. And when in the absence of family, it's your friends who are there for you, right? And women friends in particular, because we actually know what it takes to get ahead or to survive these difficult moments in our lives. So that's really the key. So I'm really grateful for your friendship, Gerry.
Oh,
Wait
him too
for
for
us to
you.
sit down and have lunch.
Yes, again, hopefully in 2021.
Hey, let's go for 2021. So thank you again, Gerry, and have a great rest of your weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.